Welcome back to Conspiracy Y, our 14th episode. On today's episode, we'll take a look at 8 public figures who were followed or being watched by the FBI or CIA at the time of their deaths. I'll take a look, read some articles, and give my opinion at the end. So let's go. In life, good things happen and bad things happen. But a certain group of people refuse to accept the findings of what happened. This is where the conspiracy is born. I'll be your host, Arthur Wells, through this journey of knowns and unknowns, information and misinformation of some of the world's most important solved and unsolved mysteries. Welcome to Conspiracy Y. Number 1. John Lennon. John Lennon was assassinated December 8th, 1980, but in 1971, the FBI put John Lennon under surveillance because of his anti-war activities. President Richard Nixon tried to deport John Lennon because he considered him a dangerous political leader. Richard Nixon tried to get John Lennon thrown out of America because he saw him as a counterculture enemy. Okay, we definitely know that the FBI was following John Lennon, but the real question is this: what do you believe? Do you really believe that the CIA and President Richard Nixon would assassinate John Lennon in order for Nixon to become president because of John Lennon's view on the war and on America politics? So that would be the question, and my answer would be yes. Moving on. Number 2, Malcolm X. The two men known at the time of the killing as Norman 3X Butler and Thomas 15X Johnson spent decades in prison for the murder, which took place on February 21st, 1965. When 3 men opened fire inside a crowded ballroom in Manhattan as Malcolm X was starting to speak. The FBI opened a file on Malcolm X in 1953 and continued surveillance until his assassination in 1965. The file, encompassing 2,300 pages, giving insight into various factions and leaders of the black militia movement during the 1950s and 60s, as well as details on the FBI attempts to neutralize it. Okay, so that day in 1965, we knew that the FBI was trailing and watching Malcolm X, which means they knew about the assassination attempts that were being put out on his life. Even Malcolm X knew about it at the time. That's why he had the gun looking out the window. He knew someone was coming for him. He just didn't know when and where. My question would be, why did the FBI let it happen? And I kind of can answer that: because they wanted him out the way. Now, do I think they had a hand in doing it, in assassinating Malcolm X? I don't think so, but I think they knew what was going to happen and they let it happen. So blood is on their hands as well. Moving on. Number 3, Tupac Shakur. Okay, no reason to even read an article on this one. It's all in my head. Tupac assassinated September 13, 1996. A lot of people know that, but what they don't know is Tupac was followed and watched by the FBI before he was even born, when he was negative numbers. Tupac's mother was a Black Panther, along with Mutulu Shakur, his stepfather. And they've watched Tupac from the beginning of his birth because they figured he would be a militant and he would be just like his mother and his stepfather and all of his uncles and cousins in the Black Panther Party, who fought against the oppression of the black people in America at that time. So Tupac was always on their radar, and they always figured Tupac would be a problem. It was all good as long as he was rapping and singing and stuff like that. But as soon as Tupac actually started to become more aware and talk about the atrocities that are being faced by Americans, especially in urban communities, they figured that, okay, he's gonna be exactly what we thought he was gonna be, so they were watching him. A lot of people don't know the hip-hop police were the first on scene after Tupac was murdered. Well, I would say shot at that time. He hadn't passed yet. And one of the cops actually said, the FBI agent said, they asked Tupac, do you know who did this shooting, who did this to you? And his last words were actually, F you. So Tupac has always rebelled against the system and against oppression. So it was no reason to think that Tupac wasn't being followed by the FBI. It's known. Now the question is, did the FBI actually have something to do with it? It kind of goes back to the Malcolm X thing. I think they were following him. They knew something was going to happen to him, and they let it happen. So blood is on their hands again in this situation. They did have a part in the murder of Tupac Shakur. Moving on. Number 4, Christopher Wallace, aka Biggie. Another story, no article needed on my part, all in my head. Biggie was assassinated March 9, 1997. And this one is a tricky story because the story ends where I didn't think it would. The FBI was only watching Biggie because of the Tupac and Biggie beef, the East Coast and West Coast beef. They wanted to see where it was going, what was him and Puff doing, because people say that Puff was actually putting hits out, they say, on certain members of the West Coast. You already had the beef between him and Suge Knight and the murder of Suge's bodyguard down in Georgia. So they were watching him for criminal activity that was going on, somewhat gangbanging. But this is where it gets tricky to me. After Biggie died in 2018, a story came out about the FBI actually hiding evidence of the Biggie's murder. I didn't think the FBI had any reason to want to kill Biggie. I think they were just watching him to see what was going to go on between this East Coast and West Coast beef. But when you bring up the whole thing about the FBI was actually hiding evidence of the Biggie Smalls murder, it leads me to believe, why would they hide it if they didn't have anything to hide? So obviously they had something to hide, which now lead me to believe they did have a small part in Biggie Smalls murder. Put it in the comment section and let me know if you think the FBI actually had something to do with Biggie's murder. Moving on. Number 5. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr., assassinated April 4th, 1968, was being watched just months before his assassination. The FBI expanded its surveillance of King, placing bugs and wiretaps in the hotel rooms he visited. The expansion reflected the FBI's new objective: collecting evidence of King's extramarital activities in order to sully his reputation and weaken him as a leader of the civil rights movement. I'm going to start off with my answer first. Yes, I believe the FBI had something to do with it. It's quite funny if you remember the photos of Jesse Jackson pointing towards the sounds of the gunfire. Those pictures were immediately after he was assassinated and the bullet was fired and hit him in the head. The FBI took those pictures. It's quite funny, they're always on the scene, the first on the scene of these assassinations. But with King, it's just crazy that they were able to take the pictures of him before he got shot, as he got shot, after he got shot, and they were able to catch the guy supposedly that fired the shot. So it's 100% to me. Well, nothing's 100%. As I say, you gotta leave room for error because you might be wrong. But I'm gonna go 99.9% that they actually had a hand in the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Moving on. Number 6. John F. Kennedy. President John F. Kennedy, assassinated November 22nd, 1963. I'm going to read two statements made by two individuals that were very close to this situation. One being J. Edgar Hoover, who released a statement 2 days after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He said, and I quote, in a memo 2 days after JFK's assassination, that the public must be led to believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. And in another statement, a former FBI agent actually came out and said in 2004 that he was actually the one that purchased the gun that they say was used in the assassination of JFK. He said he purchased it 2 weeks before the Dallas event, which is pretty strange to me. So when you break down those two statements, people that were very close. Now, some might say that that guy might have been lying, but let's say for face value that he was telling the truth. That gun was purchased, somehow it was used and then put into Lee Harvey Oswald's hands. Somehow he was a scapegoat. But you have to take J. Edgar Hoover's word, right? When he said, why would someone say that the public must be led to believe that Oswald acted alone? Why would someone say that, especially a FBI, head of FBI director? It just boggles me. Put it in the comments. Tell me what you think about it. And I'm moving on. Number 7. Nipsey Hustle. Nipsey Hustle, assassinated March 31st, 2019. When you look into this thing with Nip, it might not have been the FBI, but I'm going to put it on this list because it was the LAPD, I think in cahoots with the FBI. The one thing about Nip was he was doing a lot in the community. They didn't like it because he involved himself with Crips and Bloods and gang members and unsavory characters and individuals as they would see it from the outside looking in. They didn't like the employment that he did for certain people. He didn't like that he took them off the streets and gave them opportunities so the cops didn't have to go in there and actually do something about the urban community. They want to arrest us. They want to do things like that to the community and just in general. Doesn't matter if you're white or black, sometimes it falls on the poverty line and they don't like anyone that's poor that they perceive to cause trouble. It's known that the LAPD actually had him under investigation again, as they have with so many other celebrities, Biggie and Tupac. They had him under surveillance. They was actually once again watching him that morning. That's how you get some of those pictures that people don't want to talk about where they come from. Some people say it's from a store angle or this angle. Well, it was angles that they had that they didn't release to the public because they would have known that they were actually that close up on him. So once again, do I think that the FBI or the LAPD had something to do with Nip? Just check out my last video. Of course I do. I don't know the full details and the extent of it, but I get a real strange feeling about this one. So I'm going to end it right there. Moving on. In closing, I would like to say a few words. Some people call what we do and what we believe in as a conspiracy or a conspiracy theorist or a conspiracy theory. But tell me one thing that's a conspiracy about this. All the people that I have just named were trying to do good or trying to fight against the system. They all were followed by the FBI and they all were assassinated. How can that be a conspiracy? Until next time, and thanks for watching. I've been your host, Arthur Wells. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And get in that comment section and let me know what you think about the FBI and their involvement in certain assassinations. Once again, thanks for watching Conspiracy why.